Hey, the ascension experience stuff around parents and kids has been pretty mind blowing this week, hasn't it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's I mean, the Joshua from the very start has really changed my relationship with my kids. Just from the beginning. So this this week and even today's was I did send that request to my kids like, hey, what do you think my role in your life is? Like, what is my role? So I'll see what they have to say, and I'll share that. That was part of today's. That was the question that sort of popped into my head, and I asked them. The you know the whole idea that they're vibrationally ahead of us is easy for me to easy for me to adopt and to see the only
Because you see that in the way they are, you mean?
my only role prior to Joshua was to try to control them. That was it. That's it. You try to control them. You try to control them not getting in trouble. You can try to control what they do, that they don't do. You set parameters. I mean, that was the whole. I mean, that was literally what we grow up as parents, or what we're taught as parents, it's all about control and manipulation. You want to control your kids. You want to manipulate your kids to do as little as possible so that you don't have to, you got a couple of kids, you're trying to manage a couple of, you just want to you just want to sit down and relax, and you got to keep telling them no. All you do all day long is say no.
So it must be a lot more relaxing that you're not saying no and trying to.
Oh my God.
Them. Because controlling kids doesn't really work that well generally, does it?
No, it just adds this, there's just such conflict, right? So it just creates this conflict, and the conflict expands and it grows. And then it begins to settle in as a foundation for your relationship. So I've spent the last year sort of really just unfolding, that aspect. And it was interesting today that, Jessica had said, hey, listen, it's okay. It's like, hey, up until your teenage years, you develop those limiting beliefs. Now let's start unpacking them. And that's sort of where I am with my kids. Like, they're both teenagers, and just starting to unpack them now with them. And whatever they do, I'm not judging. I mean, they do things. I mean, I used to be so controlling, and now it's like whatever, like okay. And it's absolutely changed our relationship. And they're not. I mean, I don't. I mean, they're not doing things that they're not robbing stores. It's not like
right.
Right.
But the reason they weren't robbing stores was not you controlling them in the first place, right? So in other
100%.
They were pretty much on track, regardless of whether you were trying to control them or not.
It's interesting. My youngest daughter, who's now 15, she has some friends that are probably, experiencing, some very, very recreational drugs or alcohol, sophomore in high school, right about that time. And she was very, very close to this one girl. And my daughter ended up getting, a boyfriend, and sort of losing touch with this one girl. But my daughter's explanation about why she lost touch with her friend was that because I was too strict. So it was interesting that I'm like, I never said I couldn't hang out with her. I never said she couldn't go out. I never said any of those things. But her whole belief is that I'm too strict, and I have a curfew. Her curfew is too early. And I'm like, when she goes out, I'm like, hey, what time are you gonna be home? And I'm like, just, be home, by midnight. I mean, she's 15. It's like, do you want to stay out later? Well, and just, help me understand it. And okay. It's like, these are things that are, I think a parent, like, sort of trying to keep them safe. I'm not trying to control her, and they're just like, hey, hey, listen, tell me where you're going to be. And just so in case something happens, I can be there. So that's really where, and I am right now. But before that, I was like, hey, listen, you're home at 10 o'clock. You got to call me. You got to text me. You got to have all those different things. But, for me now, even when I say to her, hey, it's like, once again, she's 15. It's like, hey, midnight seems to be a good time, unless, there's a reason you want to be out, and help me understand that. And then, of course, sounds good. But that's really where, I think where I am right now. But she blames that on, like, reasons why she loses friends. because I'm too strict.
Well, yeah, I mean that's probably not the most authentic statement from her.
It's interesting, right? But that's her perception.
That's not why
right?
she lost friends, but she probably is trying to use that as to put pressure on you about your perceived strictness. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I know it doesn't really even bother me. I'm like, okay, I don't, because I don't really try to control her. And I'm like, she can kind of do what she wants. I mean, she comes home, I'm like, hey, you gonna be home after school? Like, oh, okay. If not, where? Like, just give me a little idea where you're gonna be, and cool. Like, so there's very little, like, and she's got her phone, she can do what she needs, but it's funny that that's her perception.
Yeah, it might be interesting to talk to her about how friends move in and out of your life throughout your entire life, but potentially, especially in those teen years when you're living at an intense and furious pace and discovering the grown-up world. And it may be that people do go through more friendships at that age than at other ages. I have no idea, but yeah, I mean, throughout your life, I mean, you may have some friends from childhood, but you've also got a lot of new friends, and like friends don't have to be for life, which is what a lot of people seem to think. Friends are friends for as long as it's right and it works for everybody, and that there is a purpose to the friendship or whatever. I mean, they don't have to be for life. And in my case, none of them are really. I don't think I have any lifelong friends.
Yeah, I definitely have. I mean, just being back home, my parents still live. My dad now still lives in the house that I grew up in. So there are people that I went to elementary school with that I still see. When I go home or whatever, I still say hi to. There's a guy that I went to college with. I went to elementary school with. And every once in a while, we're on a group text, together. But I've never looked at, to be honest, I've never needed to or been the best friend guy. Like, I don't have a best friend. That's just not something I've ever been into, or the same group of people. I've always sort of done my own thing, wanted to do that. If I played sports, I just play, I was, in with the team or doing whatever. But for my daughter, I think both of my daughters are similar to that, where like they don't really want or have a best friend.
So best friend is a cultural concept, really, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
I've often used to think, what's wrong with me? I don't really have a best friend. I have some very good friends.
Yeah, me too.
And, one of them I've reconnected with recently, a guy, I've done a lot of interesting stuff with over the years. Like, we met through what used to be called men's work, like at a men's work weekend, and quite an advanced one it was. And it was about archetypes and kind of delved on the edge of spirituality. So, but I met this guy at this kind of fairly woo-woo weekend, but it turns out that he was into motorbikes like I was, and also into hiking and, the rugged outback of New Zealand. So we ended up doing a lot of that stuff, going hiking together, and as well as sharing the personal, what used to be called personal growth stuff. But then with me living overseas, I lost touch with him and various things, but we just picked up again, like, we never dropped off. So I sent him the first Joshua book the other day. So that Amazon delivered that to him this week. And the other guy I'm really close to, I mean, he lives in France for most of the year. So, I don't actually see him very often. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. So so that's interesting to me too, and then I want to jump on your agenda from the other day. Like, is it more that are the people that are more a vibrational match to I think to alignment, less likely to be attached to one person?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That because to some extent, the idea of having a best friend is a security thing, isn't it? That, or a worthiness thing. It's like, I got somebody who thinks I'm awesome, and like a best friend probably has more unconditional regard for you than anybody other than perhaps a parent. And so I mean, I think it's just a cultural construct, the best friend thing. And I suppose if you're not caught up in the need to have that, then you just experience the love and joy of a person you're hanging out with in the moment.
See, that's a super interesting, and that's a great way to talk to even my kids about it, that having a best friend is a cultural thing, and especially for our society.
Yeah. Well, it's like romantic love, really, like the concept of romantic love and, being, I mean, the concept of being a couple really has has economic and security roots in our, probably our nomadic and certainly our village histories, as a species. But the concept of romantic love is quite a recent cultural construct. And people say, oh my God, the divorce rate is so high and, marriages fail and people are unhappy in marriage and all the rest of it. But there's an assumption behind that being married is like having a leg, it's not, being married is not actually an essential part of the human condition. It's a cultural concept that is widely used, but it's a social construct, isn't it, really? So, and it works pretty well. And, I like it and all the rest of it, but it's romantic love per se wasn't even the basis of marriage until recently. And because it's a social idea and it doesn't fit, perfectly with the human condition, like having a leg does, then no wonder people get divorced and then have another go at it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's good. I mean, I wouldn't want to be married to the first person I married anymore personally, because we both changed and we actually didn't get on that well. And so, a lot of people, I think, have traced my partner now, and we will get married. She was a vibrational match to her first husband and they had a son together. But like, if you met him now, I met her, you would never contemplate the idea that they could ever be married. They are so different and their lives and everything is so different. Like, in other words, they moved in completely different directions. So, that was a good thing. It's like a vibrational match at this point, but not at that point. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. Hey, listen, I'm just going to grab the notes from today and I'm just keeping an eye. I've just moved my laptop and I haven't plugged it in. So I might grab the Power Pack as well. But what I want to talk about from this week's stuff is the idea that there's two things. One is children come in at a higher vibrational level than their parents. And the second thing is that the fundamental role of a parent, and I'm thinking of my father in this case, because I've kind of just got over my negative attitudes about my father recently, the purpose, the role that he played in my life, and Joshua says this in this week's lesson, is once I was born, his job was done. And perhaps even once I was conceived, his job was done. So then I thought, oh, okay, I had all these expectations that you should have been all these other things as a father, and you weren't those things, but that was just a list that I made up, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
And that list is not that relevant. And so once I let go of all of that and realized, okay, once I came onto the planet, his job was done. As it turned out, he did give me a lot of other things. It's just that they weren't things that were on my father's ought to be the following sort of list. Yeah, I thought that was big, really big, that stuff.
This has been really interesting.
Excuse me, you keep talking while I grab my Power Pack and my notes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So this has really been interesting, and I agree with you this week, especially with my mother passing last week, and my sister and my brother and I all having a very different relationship with my parents, and then with each other, and then all of us having kids, and all of us being very different parents with our kids. So it's really sort of been this like everything coming together, one giant sort of a meeting. And the one question that in this that was last week's that I'm still asking myself is like, what is the role your mother or your father were here to teach you? What was the one big element? And like you, I struggled to find a positive in that. Okay, what are they trying to teach me? I could list the negatives of what they were trying to teach me. But the idea that both of my parents were here to teach me something, I struggled with, because what I found was that I think the only thing they really did was bring me into the world. And I talked to my brother and sister, and they were like, I'm the oldest. And they were like, you were just gone. Like right after college, you were gone. And like during high school, you were never there. Like you were just, you played every sport. You were never home. You were just out. the minute you went from college, you moved. You're the only one in the family that moved away from the immediate family. So for me, it's super interesting, and I'm trying to see, and I have a very different relationship with my kids than my parents had with me. And I found that question incredibly provocative, and I'm like, I can't really find a positive. What I do see, and I've said this to people, is that my mother is the greatest example of unfulfilled potential, and my dad is the perfect example of living in fear your entire life. And they
Right.
both showed me those things, right? So maybe that's we could talk about them saying, "Hey, this is what it looks like if you do that." And you're like, "Oh my God, don't do that." Right.
So
But it
maybe you got to
was,
flip it around. I found this on the sidewalk the other day. It's 50 cents, New Zealand 50 cents. And but being a coin, it has two sides, right? So
yeah,
on this side is I think it's the Endeavour, which was the sailing ship of Captain James Cook, who was the first white person to land in New Zealand. He got killed in Hawaii. Anyway, the point is, it's a coin with two sides. So the other side of that coin is, instead of what were your parents there to teach you, is what were you there to teach them, is probably a lot more rich pickings in that side of the coin, right? So the other day in a call on this topic, this woman who was new to boot camp said to Joshua, "I teach 3 to 5-year-old children. How can I introduce these teachings to these children?" And Joshua says, "How about this? Why don't you think about what they can teach you?" And they did answer the question in terms that she asked as well, because they said, well, you could make up a children's story based around these themes and tell them the story, which I thought was, and some other things they said. So they did answer what she actually was asking, but their primary answer was, well, actually, you don't have anything to teach those kids right now. They have more to teach you. They don't have manifestation events. They're not feeling unworthy. They're not feeling lack. Like all of these things that we start to explore, these kids ain't doing that currently. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So if you look at it from the other point of view, I think it's pretty obvious that you showed a lot of things, taught a lot of things to your parents. Whether they wanted to take the learning or not is another matter.
you know what, I didn't even think of it that way. Yeah, that is such a profound flip or reframing. That's a great way. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way.
I knew that 50 cents would come in handy one day.
That's great.
Yeah.
But I do see it, and I've actually kind of loved these last 2 weeks, because and Gary actually said to me, like, your daughter, my oldest daughter, who's at college, she's just having a blast. She sends these images. I look at them, like, I just go, oh my God, I can't even, it like brings you back. And Gary said, like, well, she's there to show you how to have fun again. There's no question. Because I keep the same question I've asked you, I've asked Gary, I've asked Joshua. I'm like, how do I have fun again? How do I laugh when I laugh like when I'm 16? Like, I want to laugh like that again. I want to embrace life like that again. And I want to let go of this resistance to that I've obviously buried, over those years. And, Gary's like, that's what, and then your other daughter is like, she's a little bit more of fearful, right? So she just puts the toe in. My oldest daughter's just jumping in, doesn't even care. And I'm like, and it is, I do see clearly what my kids are supposed to be here teaching me. I mean, it's, and when I'm around little kids, Rob, now I look at it completely different. Like, I sit there, and I was just out this past weekend. One of my friends has a new baby, and I was just sitting there, like, I was like looking at him and going, wow. And like the eyes, the appreciating of everything, the happiness, the joy. You're like, I want to be that again. How do I get back there?
Yeah. So this is a theme that you raised previously when you mentioned about when you were younger, sometimes you would belly laugh so much, you like it hurt and you couldn't stop laughing, and you couldn't properly breathe anymore, and you were just falling on the floor laughing, right? And, I mean, there is that expression in social media. What is it? ROFL, like roll on the floor laughing, right? But it's only an abbreviation in social media for most grown-ups. It's not actually. How many of us actually roll on the floor laughing? Since we were like maybe 3 or 5 or something, we probably haven't done a lot of that. And when you think about it, it was a great idea of yours to raise that a few weeks back, because why have we lost that? And I mean, laughing to that extent feels incredible. When you really, really, really laugh. I think I've told you that in India, in Mumbai, where we've been living pre-COVID, that there are all these amazing kind of spiritual practices going on the big park early in the morning. People doing Tai Chi and yoga and nostril breathing and meditation and chanting and singing. And, it's just normal middle-class people doing what Indian people do, which is living a spiritual life. And one of the groups is a laughing group. And there's all these people in their 70s, and they just basically focus on, having an orchestrated belly laugh every few minutes.
But isn't that one of the keys to alignment? Isn't that one of the most important steps to acceptance? To be able to see everything in joy and to see everything in love, and to be able to embrace that. And at some point that embracement becomes laughter, right? Because it's pure. Maybe I associate true joy or true fulfillment with laughter.
Yeah. Well, I
don't know if it's right.
That's probably a good thing, a good way to look at it. I mean, the Dalai Lama tends to be a fairly laughing sort of a character, doesn't he? I remember there was a guy I knew back in 1982 or something, and he was into some spiritual teacher, maybe called Free John or something, but I remember it was called the Laughing Man Institute.
There is
I know nothing about it, not recommending it. Don't know if it exists, don't know if it's good or bad, but the Laughing Man Institute, that sounds like a good idea.
It does. I go to these stand-up comedy shows. I love stand-up comedy. I'm always looking at, if I'm on social media or if I'm doing something, I'm looking at stand-up comics. I'm looking at all kinds of stuff because I want to laugh. I'm like, okay, well, and I get the, oh, that was great giggle, but I don't get the, it's to be able to, I think, be free of resistance where you can actually truly lean into that enjoyment of whatever it is to the point where your whole body is getting into the act. That to me is the definition of alignment in my mind.
Right. So,
right. Not that it's right. I'm just.
No, I think that's really good. Like I probably, I don't know which came first. Like I studied anthropology and I did that through, right through my degree, social anthropology. I studied sociology. I studied linguistics, up to graduate level at university. And so I've always been very interested in social science and aspects of human behavior. And so I tend to look at these things. So I've often looked, like there's a bar here down, it's on the water, right on the water. You wouldn't be allowed to build a building like that on the beach now, but it's right on the water and it's called Harbour, like harbour. It's a pun on the word harbour, so it's called Harbour. Anyway, so a lot of people in their 60s and 70s, it's quite a wealthy little village, a lot of holiday homes. You see them congregating there on a Friday night, these groups of friends, and they make a lot of noise and laugh a lot. And I was just thinking, what is the appeal of sitting in a bar? I mean, it's beautiful because you can see the sun go down in the water and it's obviously a nice setting, but what is it that draws people together and they, shout at each other and laugh? Like, if you ask people, why do you like going out to dinner with your friends? Like, I don't know if most people could really answer that. We know we love it and it's a lot of fun, but why do we do it? And some of it I just realized is that it's a context in which they can be carefree, let off some steam, and can actually start to laugh and just have silly fun like they did when they were 5 or 3 years old. Maybe that's part of it, right? Is like somebody else is doing all the catering, they're bringing it to you. You don't have to be a grown-up. You can just exist in pure fun with people you enjoy being with. Do you have a better explanation as to why we like going to a bar or out to dinner with friends?
Yeah, it's so funny. So I have this friend who you would love, right? The guy he's literally the quintessential funny man, but he's serious. But when I go to these trips, right? So it's a bunch of dads taking our daughters to do this. It's so great for our connection with our daughters. So great connection with everything when we go to these lacrosse trips. It's literally like 6 of us, 6 dads. We run the team, we do it. And we got 40 girls. We have 2 teams that we take. And a couple moms come. But we always say, like, after the last game on like Friday or Saturday, like, oh, let's go meet down in the lobby. We'll have a beer. Everyone can. And the first thing is, I can't wait to hear Matt's stories. Like this, we go to dinner. We go out because we want to hear someone else's story. We live our life right now, I believe, as an adult, looking to constantly check tasks. Like, oh, what do I do today? Right? when we have that moment with friends, or you're down at that bar and you're listening to somebody's stories, right? It takes you away. It's like watching a movie. It's no different than sitting around a campfire 200 years ago, right? Though the people that could tell the best stories were the most popular. The people that could take you into that. And once again, because if you're laughing and you're getting into it, you're in alignment. You're loving that person. You're loving what they're saying. You're loving the person next to you because they're laughing. Just there's no judgment. And once you take judgment, I think, out of that relationship, and it's very difficult to do, right? If you're sitting at a dinner with friends, you're not great. Maybe they're talking about what they do, and you're going, "Well, that guy, he shouldn't make that much money. He doesn't do it right." But when someone's telling you a funny story, those judgments don't exist. You're just looking at the person next to you going, he's laughing harder than you, or she's laughing harder than you. And this is one big embrace, right? I mean, like, how do I get there again? I mean, I know that when we do these trips, I mean, we literally time it. We're like, okay, last game's here, guys. We'll see you guys down there at 6:30. And like by 7:00, Matt's had like 1 or 2 beers, and he's telling us like stories that literally your head explodes because they are that funny. And like, he knows how to tell a story. Right.
So we get to that place of that mirth or joy or that uninhibited laughter. We get to that in those kind of semi-ritualized settings, right? Of going to a bar after the games with the kids and so on. And then the next step would be, well, which is what you've been asking, is how do I bring more of that into my everyday life instead of purely in those ritualized settings where we have permission to be that way for a brief period?
It's so. And here's another interesting from my perspective. So I have daughters at these ages where they're still kids, but they're just on the cusp of being an adult. I don't even know what that means, right? But just because of their age and they're in college and getting their own job, right? When you watch the kids, so they'll, like, my daughter was home from college last weekend and she had 6 friends with her. So 7 girls, plus my other 15-year-old, a couple of her friends. They're around a table, and it was so loud with laughter. It was so loud with this joyous, and I'm listening and going, like, I just want to. And then I watch them when they want to have an event, and they all get dressed up and they sit around a table, and they want to act like adults. They're quiet. They're not having as much fun, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, is this what we're teaching them? Is this what we're doing to them? Like, we literally, I think adulthood is sucking the joy out of our children, preparing them for the tough world. Yeah.
That's a good insight, because sometimes when I'm in Auckland, the biggest city in New Zealand, Trace's son lives there. They live near this girls' college, and there are a lot of Pacific Island girls, Samoa and other girls there. And when they walk along this street, Karangahape Road, K Road, after school, they make a lot of noise. They are so loud it just about hurts your ears, but they are completely uninhibited and they're having fun. And I think about it and I thought, well, this is pretty interesting, because first of all, if you compare them to, say, the posh private, paid schools where you pay 20 grand a year or something, to send your kid to, which, traditionally has always been the white girls, but not just now. But anyway, they probably, they're being taught to be ladies and to behave responsibly, right? Whereas currently those girls are not necessarily being subjected to those sorts of controls where it's not okay to make a lot of noise walking down the road, right? There's no sense of decorum, if you like. So they're also young enough that they actually haven't had to go through that thing. And so I kind of wondered, is there both an age factor and a cultural factor there for those girls? And will they lose that spontaneous joy and noise thing as they get older? I guess it depends what they end up doing for jobs and education. And, if they start to become lawyers, then they're not going to be making that much noise in law school, are they? No. But at that point, these girls are really loud and they're having a lot of fun, and they're completely oblivious to, me or someone else walking down the street. Like, the street may as well be empty as far as they're concerned. And I think this is a pretty fabulous thing. And I have no idea whether it's age or culture or a bit of both, but good luck to them is all I can say. Don't lose your joy, right, girls.
And I think the culture plays a huge aspect of that. I love that story. And from my, I know if I'm going out and I'm laughing and my wife may turn to me, oh, you're being too loud. And I'll look, oh, okay, honey, I'm sorry. And
she does know she married an Italian American from New York, though, doesn't she? Does she know this?
She does.
Like,
She
okay,
does.
did she think that she married the quiet version, or there was a volume control? But you guys don't come with volume controls, do you?
No, we really don't. Or hand control. The other thing is hand control.
Yeah.
But I love that. And I do think that what you just pointed out is so critical. And if we could find a way, and if you talk about the book you're creating of the course, how to make money authentically, this is an important part of how to make money is the joy, right? And the joy in doing what we're doing. And I do think that my role since starting the Joshua teachings now a year ago December, right, will be to not suck the joy out of my kids' life, not to teach them to be quiet, right? It's so my daughter, I talked to her today because I was asking her to do the question that Joshua asked us on the plot, like, hey, what do you, and she said to me, oh, hey, one of my other friends is going to come home with me Thanksgiving. She was just back there. She wants to talk to you about a few things. She wants to hang out. Is it okay if I bring more friends home? I'm like, yeah, because when they were home, I had them download like Coinbase. We started buying crypto, it's like, we were just having fun. I'm like, girls, buy $5. You could buy $10. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want anybody getting in trouble. And if there's something in there, please don't. But you could download it. Obviously, if you have to put your social security, you don't have to put your whole social security number in there anymore. It's just your last 4 digits. And I don't know. In the United States, we have social security numbers that mean everything. You can't do anything without a social security number.
Yeah, we don't have that. Yep.
Right. So I said, just check with your parents. I don't want to, overstep, but you're all 18 now. You can do this. And they had a blast. And we were just giggling. And I'm telling them, I'm like, oh, I've made mistakes that I've lost millions. They're like, what? I'm like, oh yeah, millions. They're like, are you kidding me? I'm like, oh no. And they're like, why are you so on? I'm like, oh no. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to say. Like, it's money. You make it, you lose it, you make it. I don't know what to say. I'm like, yeah, it was stressful when it happened, but I giggle now. I'm like, to me, it was the greatest experience of my life. Because when you tell people you lost millions, right? It's like you made millions, Rob. But when you tell people, which is more empowering, when you tell them you lost the millions or when you made the millions? For me, it's more empowering when I tell them I'm like, I lost it all, and I'll make it.
I'll let you know when I tell more people. You're ahead of me on this one, my friend.
But I so and then I have my daughter telling me, hey, a couple more. So to me, it's like, okay, this is what I think. This is the answer that as the universe is giving me the answers to my question. As you and I have been talking for the last 2 or 3 weeks on the same question, it's giving me the answers. I'm just now seeing them. Right? It's giving me my daughter and her friends. They're all I'm seeing it all. But I wasn't putting it on.
Do your kids see you as quite a different person in the last year, or do they not really notice?
Did I tell you that the thing that kicked this all off in 2016, that actually 2017, that actually started me on this journey was my daughter said to me, my oldest daughter is now in college, said to me, Dad, are you ever going to be happy again, or are you just going to be angry for the rest of your life?
Wow.
Yeah.
Great question. That's a gift if ever there was one. Incredible.
And then I downloaded a Tony Robbins tape on the way to work that day. And I started literally from that day, which was like a May something day. I have it written down, like a May 17th type of day on 2017. I have every single day focused at some point of that day on finding joy or finding peace, not joy, peace.
So do you think you were depressed at that time?
Yes, I had lost my company, lost millions. I didn't have a job. I was an absolute mess. Depressed would be an easy way to describe that. I mean, you probably could go on.
I asked that question for several reasons. One reason is that Krista, who's doing this work, Krista Zimmerman, she just made an amazing course about, I forget what she calls it, but it's essentially drinking alcohol without fear. So she's been an alcoholic, she's done the 12 steps, but she found that was victim thinking. And she's actually extraordinarily got to the point where if she wants to have a glass of wine, she'll have a glass of wine, and she feels no need to have more than that, right? So the idea in the 12 steps thing, if you're an alcoholic, you can never touch it again because you've got no control. Well, she's moved beyond that. And so she's got a course around how to move beyond that. And her next 2 topics she's working on are insomnia and depression. So she's had all these problems, and she's actually somehow managed to get to a place where they're no longer problems for her by using this kind of work. So her next one she's doing now, we're helping her put it online, is around depression. So she's channeling that now. And I told her that after my wife Sandy, she got dementia and then died, and a lot of bad stuff happened, with legal disputes and all sorts of crap. But I went to see this grief counselor, and one day he said to me, I don't think you're grieving, I think you're depressed. And that was a shock to me, because I was like the Energizer Bunny, probably how you would have seen yourself. And it's like, not me, I don't do depression. That's not possible. And I thought about it, and I realized he was right. And I was telling Krista that, and I said, but I'm not now. And so she's like, well, how did you get from depression to where you are now? And it's probably a similar journey to you. And I think it's something super valuable to a lot of people who have degrees of depression. And I'm not talking about clinical depression and needing, the chemicals missing in the body, whatever. All I know is what happened to me is that I think this guy was right, and I was depressed, but I'm not now.
I think, and I love what you just said, and that's really powerful. And it just reminded me today on the daily spiritual practice, Joshua's quote. And when it comes to depression, because my wife takes Prozac, and so does my youngest child. Now Prozac, I don't know what it's like, Zoloft in the United States.
Yeah. So I actually was researching, as part of my background, thinking about Krista stuff. I did some research on the percentage of Americans who take antidepressants, and it's much higher with women than men, by the way. I think 17% of American women take an antidepressant.
And suicide for men is 3 times higher than it is for. So look up that. So you want to find what.
Right.
So you really want to understand what's going on.
Yeah. So if they took more Prozac, they might have fewer suicides.
Well, it's also this goes to the quote, right? It's perception of ourselves. What what was funny at my mother's funeral, the priest talks about respect. And he said, what respect is? And I forget the journey he took me on. I've actually asked my dad for his email. I'm going to email the priest and ask him. He said, respect is how you perceive yourself. And I forget how he got there. It's the mirror image. We all think respect is something we demand. Respect is how you see yourself. Either you respect yourself or you don't. And, when you look at today, it says you create your own reality by how you perceive yourself in relation to what you believe is real in your outside world. If you perceive yourself to be a victim, for instance, your outer world will form around you concepts of yourself, and you will encounter an experience and make you feel like a victim. You will be victimized. It's a momentum, right? All these things that you and I have been talking about, if you put them together and you look at the straight line of thought, depression becomes when you see yourself as less than somebody else, as less than love, as unworthy. Then you begin to get the victimhood. You begin to only see that color in the world, and that momentum brings you down. And like I was missing my daughter's showing me what joy was. I mean, 2 weekends or 3 weeks, my daughter from college coming home with friends. You talk about the universe giving you a sign. How did I miss? I mean, she hasn't been home for 4 months. She comes home with 6 kids, right? I'm like,
because you and I defined ourselves as having the money, and our persona we thought was who we were. And if you strip that away, it's like, well, I'm nothing and I'm a failure. And then it's like you hit the bottom and you bounce back up, and you're reborn as somebody who understands your true worth, which is about who you are, not what you have. But you and I took some pummeling from the universe to actually wake up and hear that message. Like, are you listening to me? No. Okay, well, I'm going to smack you down some more. Are you listening to me now? No, not yet. Okay, well, attract more of that stuff you don't want. What about now? Okay, yeah, I'm starting to listen. Okay, well, let up a little.
But it is true. I mean, I didn't know what to do when my own company had fired me. Like, that identity, the name of the company and the identity was me. I was the owner. I was the founder. Like, for 15 years, that's how I introduced myself to people. When that was taken away, I didn't even know what to say. And now it's funny. I finally have everything I'd asked for. You get the titles, the cards, all this kind of, and now I don't even okay, now I don't want it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I actually don't present myself to the world as anybody in particular now. I don't make any claims or say anything. If people ask, I'll tell them what I do. But, not that many people ask. They just kind of accept me as they see me and know very little about me, which is cool. And I feel no need to tell them. That quote you read, was that from boot camp week 2?
Oh, that was from today's the daily spiritual practice. At the very, very top is a Joshua quote.
Oh, the quote for the day. Right. I haven't read that yet. It's still
And yeah,
morning,
so
early morning
I
here. Yeah.
honestly, like I take a picture of those quotes and I send them out to friends every morning. Like they are really profound, and meaningful to me. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah, they are good. I share them a lot, and I save a lot of them as resources for that making money authentically, new approach to money course that I'm making.
You know,
Because
and I had something the other day I got to send you. Okay, so it was, I forget who it was, Tony Robbins or Dean Graziosi. We were talking about how to make money. Oh, it was to make money, you got to get up at 4 a.m. You got to work hard. You got to put all this effort in. You can never snooze. You can't. And I was looking at this list of what it was to make money, and I'm like, oh yeah, been there, done that. I was fucking miserable. Excuse my language. I'm like, holy cow. I looked at this list and there's like 10 million followers on this guy. And I'm like, oh my goodness. No wonder still only 1% of the world is wealthy, right? You're
yeah,
like, this is not,
yeah,
this is not the, it is sleep. You know what? Sleep till 6 or 7 if you need to. Like, that's okay. Like, go to bed, get your sleep. Like, it's this badge of honor to wake up before everybody else because I just proved I'm better than everybody else. Okay, you
yeah,
just broke the first law. You just broke
yeah.
the first
And
law.
there's all those get up earlier than everyone else and have a cold shower and all that kind of carry on, which is almost like self-flagellation as a virtue.
Right. Well, and I like getting up early, and I will
Yeah,
love the cold bath. The cold bath invigorates me. So, like, if I want
yeah,
to change, like, if for
yeah,
to that point, I'm like, I look at things that say, how do I change where I actually feel good? Like, I get that the physiology. I mean, you could wake up, you could lie back down and meditate and fall asleep for 2 more hours, right? But like getting up, sitting up, like meditating, sitting up, like with meditating with purpose to engage in my inner self really is beautiful, right? If you just sort of do laissez, yeah, if that's what you need, great. But are you really listening, right, to what's being given you? And I find myself, falling back and forth. So the more for me, the more I find myself paying attention to what I'm hearing and listening carefully, the more I'm able to, put a little smile on my face and go, okay, I'm going to do this today. Okay, right. Versus, here's my task list. Like, okay, I'm just doing this. I'm doing all right. Here we go. Right. So I'm constantly every morning on the lookout for bringing joy into my life. Like, how do I do that? And it's the first question I ask. When I meditate, I'm like, I'm just looking to bring some joy into my life today. And like I said, I was missing it. And I realized today with my daughter, when she called and said, I'm gonna bring more friends home, they had such a blast talking to you about money, talking to you about this. And I'm like, okay, that's super interesting. Like, I didn't even realize, and then my mother-in-law's boyfriend is a conspiracy theorist, like hysterical. Like, he takes stuff very, very, very serious, very, very seriously. And so we had him come over and tell the girls all of his theories. And like flat earth, he's got a flat earth theory. Oh, he'll tell you so it's literally, and I just love it. I mean, I spent a lot of time with, they're like, how do you spend time with him? Like I don't care. Like, he doesn't affect me. He's happy. Like, he's the happiest guy on the planet. And I don't try to convince him. And my daughter's like, oh dad, can you make sure Todd comes over? Because he's so funny. And I'm like, well, honey, he doesn't think he's funny. He's serious.
He's taking
And I'm
himself
like,
seriously. Yeah,
I said, you
yeah,
just need to put that in perspective so you don't hurt his feelings, right? But
yeah.
enjoy it, but we're not here to hurt people's feelings and judge them, So all these things that are happening around me that are bringing so much joy to everybody, I was missing. So it's kind of interesting.
So it's an important perspective, I think, that if somebody has a different view, for example, a conspiracy theorist, is that you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to try and convince them. You don't have to comment at all. If they want to talk and tell us, then let them do that. We caught up with a friend. He's in his early 80s, and I bought a house from him actually about nearly 20 years ago, and we became very good friends. And I hadn't seen him since we came back from overseas, so I hadn't really socialized with him for 8 or 10 years. And he's been sending me these random conspiracy theory links on Telegram because he thinks he's discovered Telegram and how awesome it is, even though I've been using it forever. But and because they think it's got some, special, it's better than WhatsApp, more secure, not Facebook or something, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so he said, let's catch up. So I thought, oh God, here we go. And so Trace said, well, you don't have to agree with him, but he, it might be good to listen to him and see what he's got to say. So I thought, okay, yeah, I can do that. And I really like this guy and I really respect him. And, he's a wonderful man. So he started telling us the stuff, and his wife is like, oh, no, hold on, John, stop there. That's a bit much. And we said, oh, no, tell us what you think. And so we didn't agree with it, but we didn't disagree either. And we just told him, oh, yeah, we actually did have COVID, and he'd never met anybody who'd had COVID, so he didn't really think it was real. But what he said, which was the key point I want to make, that relates to what you're saying, is that he said, oh, this is so good. I'm among friends and I can say what I think. I can tell, I'm with friends and I can say what I think, and it's so good. He said, because some of my friends, they've got really angry and it's become very difficult and I can't actually say what I think. And I thought, wow, like, he's a very good man. He's got a lot of really good attributes. He's been a really successful businessman. He's, and I enjoyed talking to him about a lot of different things, including business. And as I say, he's been a mentor in many ways as well, and a lot of fun. And it's like, well, hold on, I don't agree with his religious views either. They're not mine. He's, he's got some sort of, I don't know what his Christian beliefs are, but I don't have those beliefs at all. But that never stopped me liking him or his wife. And so why would this, but people have become so polarized. COVID has been somehow the great polarizer, that so many people are so fiercely pro or anti-vaccine, or fiercely pro or anti-wearing a mask, or lockdowns, or mandates, where you've got to be double vaxxed to go into a place or to work there, or whatever it might be. And so many people are so polarized. But like Gary and Jackie said on their podcast recently on, the Joshua Live and on the Evolution Pod Club, they said, well, you could sit in the middle of the bell curve instead of being at the extremes. You could just sit in the middle and not really have a view and let people, if they feel the need, to say their thing. But that's the important thing, is like that man, whatever his name was, Todd or something, like leaving him free to say his stuff without getting angry and without disagreeing with him. That's good. That's really good.
Yeah, and I think he's like that greatest gift I've ever been given, where honestly, he was the one who got me into crypto. So all these things, and literally does, he, like I said, I think I've told you this, where he's told me 9/11 didn't happen. I was in New York. I was actually like right around the corner. I was in the Empire State Building watching the planes hit. He's like, it never happened. It was all just a government conspiracy. And I'm just like, okay. I'm like, I have friends that were in the tower. I'm like, I like, it's got to that point where, to be honest, if you find a situation, if you find an environment where you do not have to self-edit, right? That, to me, self-editing is one of the most detrimental things we can do for ourselves. And the first step, I believe, into not having to self-edit is to love everybody, right? It's to accept everybody. So if I'm not accepting my friend, and he's a good friend, and he's a very smart guy, if I'm not accepting him and everything he's got, then I'm going to create resistance, and I'm going to create anger, and I'm going to create distrust, right? And I'm going to, create those sort of manifestation events. But if I just let him be who he's being, just love him for that, like we go play golf together 4 hours in a golf cart. He's talking the whole time, and I'm just laughing, and I'm like, this is and I don't care, but he believes it. His reality, those things exist in his reality. They don't exist in mine.
Yeah.
And I don't care.
Why do you think so many people feel the need to vehemently disagree with somebody, for example, on conspiracy theories or their vaccine view, or social media for that matter? Yeah,
it's about being right. It's about being right, and their fear that they're doing something wrong. Because, and I do think the news media plays a huge role in this, especially in America, where they are telling you, think about this: if you are a red person, voting for Republican, you are a racist. If you are a blue person, you are a moron. Literally, this is what is being told to Democrats or Republicans. All Republicans are haters, violence, murderers, and racist. And all Democrats are literally morons, the dumbest people on the planet. So things are going, they don't understand money. They don't, immigration's crazy. Right? So both groups of people just want to be right, and they're arguing. My wife and I have, like, we laugh at this. We're like, hey, well, I don't care. Like, does it? And to be honest, and this is Gary's greatest thing, none of it affects me. None of it. I don't care.
Yeah, that is the thing, is that it has little or no impact on your life. And so therefore it is just a thought. And if it is just a thought, then why are you getting so exercised and upset about it when
it's a judgment, right?
And you can choose your thoughts.
And all they're doing is judging each other. The Republicans are judging the Democrats are Republicans. Yeah. And I'm like, well, what are you guys doing? Like, everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants people to be safe and to be happy and to be able to take care of themselves, right? They just have different views on how to do it. And they're so angry that the other person is not listening to their view that they now personally attack them. And you're like,
yeah, you're right. Like, it is the need to be right. And there's another thing that Joshua has mentioned a few times, which is people seeking agreement, that people are always seeking agreement. They want people to agree with their point of view. And if you think about it, a lot of even jokes that people tell and stories they tell are kind of, there's a set of values behind it where they're actually, if you're laughing at my joke, then you're kind of congruent with my belief system. And so people use a lot of different ways to get that kind of agreement. And humor that's not really humor is one of those, really.
Well, think about this. Think about a joke that is not targeted to a human being, but targeted to a culture, targeted to some esoteric element. And now they're being judged, right, for X, Y, or Z. In America right now, you cannot open your mouth without being judged by either side. Both sides are equally wrong. Both sides are equally destructive. Both sides are doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind, right? Both sides are equally destructive. I mean, it's like, it's not even a question, right? But some things are funny. And it's not an attack. It's just funny. It's okay to say an Italian talks with his hands. I'm not offended by that. Yeah. It's okay to say, I don't know how to shut up. I'm not offended by any of those things. Yeah. I actually find them very funny. And I'm like, you're right. My mom, who was, she died at 82. She will tell you this, that she said her whole life, she couldn't stop talking like this. Right? I'm like, I get it. I'm the same way. But that's, Bill, you can't say that now. Like, what do you mean you can't? Of course
yeah. You can. Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, people are far more aware of using various put downs and racist attitudes than they were. But at the same time, there's a massive loss of freedom of speech. Well, whether we ever had it in the first place, I don't know. But we imagine that we live in these societies that have free speech, but not really, because there's only a limited range of things you can talk about. Or if you talk about a certain topic, you have to follow the kind of standard line. Like, it's one thing to accept that climate change is happening. Like, most people would say, the climate is changing. And most people would say, yes, and it certainly appears that humans have done it. It's anthropogenic global warming, blah, blah, blah. But then the next part is, which I think has often been hijacked, is, and you must be in fear and you must follow my line, as like we have a Green Party, which is actually more of a socialist party than a Green Party. And, Greta Thunberg, who's become a spokesperson for a generation or something. But all of those kinds of organizations, they tend to, Greenpeace, whatever, they tend to take those things, those issues, and then turn them into fear and then pretend that they have the solution. And that's why you should believe them and follow them. And, that kind of, I wouldn't say it's mass manipulation of public thinking, because you don't have to subscribe to it. But to me, it's like, okay, it's one thing that we talk about the climate changing, but it's another thing that you own the agenda and the issue and you've got the answer. And most of it is done around fear. And, you could say, well, I believe that machine in Iceland could be the future of it, that, sequesters carbon, or, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen and what the answer will be.
No, and I agree with you. It is mass manipulation, and it's done through, if you buy into the illusion, right? And we both know this, and a message is repeated enough. Now, once again, like I hear that doesn't, I'm like, I used to get all fired up, right? I'm like, whatever. I stopped watching. I can't remember last time I watched the news. My wife will watch the news. I'll give her a big kiss and say, honey, I'm going to go read, and I'm like, and I don't like, if people want to watch it, go right ahead. But my kids, people, and even now, there is a message. Even if it was, think about this. if the news media across the globe spent as much time talking about the good that people did versus beating up and judging everybody, do you think we would have as much conflict as we would have now? Probably not.
Like I said, nobody would be watching because people would rather watch the fear stuff. The only people would be watching would be the people on the, following the teachings of Joshua or Abraham or something. The rest of the people will be looking for the fear channel.
But if you look at, I mean, just to give you an idea of like how we've understood this from a very, very a young society, where if you look at even after World War II, the news people that were really engaged with the propaganda, the genocide propaganda that was going on by the Nazis, they were found guilty as well. So it wasn't just this government. So the news media, and I'm sure all these people are nice people and they're all trying to do the right thing. They feel like they're doing the right thing. They feel like they're informing the public, right? I get that. I'm not here to criticize them. And I get all those different things, but it's the message that's being repeated. And you really start to talk back about why this original conversation, like what of our kids, right? Where like for me, the kids aren't watching the news. You're talking about alignment.
That's a good thing. The thing about the news is that people consume it in various ways, right? And two of the most common ways to consume news are online, where they know what you're interested in because of the click counting, or it's broadcast, let's say it's on TV, and they know from either cable subscriptions or for, public antenna TV, they might actually do those surveys like they used to do. So anyway, my point is that the news channels know what stuff people will click on and what they're interested in, right? So the internet has really made it that the news is what people want to watch, which is why it's kind of gone comparatively lowbrow, because eventually people realize that nobody's interested in the editorial and what the editor thinks. They want all those stories that confirm their fears. And so, but behind it, really, news channels are really just organizations to sell advertising, right? And you and I are in advertising. So I'm not, there's nothing wrong with advertising. And if it's done well, it's great, because if you get messages of things you're interested in, that's cool. But anyway, so the whole point about news channels is they are organizations geared up to sell advertising, because that's how they make their money. And because of modern technology, they have a very good idea about what people will click most and read most and watch most. And so therefore they just give people more of what they want. So, people can say the mass media are this, that, and the other, but actually they're just reflecting back what the bulk of their viewers or readers want. And therefore they give them that, because then they get more ad clicks because they got more eyeballs. So it's totally a reflection of the population. And if people are in fear and want to watch that stuff, or read it, they're going to give us more of it.
That's really well said. And it couldn't be more accurate. That is just a reflection of what, we as a society are asking for. And I think some of us, right, you and I are having these conversations where, we've stepped out of that cycle, right? It's that we're no longer in that. And I know I used to get up early and watch certain news shows to be informed, right? I wanted to do certain things, right? And before I went to work, right? Do all these. I no longer do that, right? I've stepped out of that cycle and into this idea that we're I think just exploring together with Joshua is, how do I become, more in alignment with my highest good, right? And the highest good of everybody around me. How do we fit? And if you look at the fear that's going on right now, it's everybody that's their vibrational fit right now. They're unlocking all of this fear. Their vibrational key is tuned into fear, everything. So more fear, more. And if you step out of that, right, I'm not feeding my vibrational fear. I spend every day going through the Joshua teachings. Let's say it's 2-3 hours a day, either in the morning or the evening, right? I am tuning myself into that alignment every single day. I could have spent that time in the past watching news, reading, right?
Yeah. So that's the thing, really. You are responsible for the messages you bring in and the vibration of those messages. I've never, ever coped with morning television, because to me, it was like, that's a time of peace and reflection and setting intentions, even before I ever knew what that was consciously. All I knew was like, oh, that's noisy. And I don't want anyone else to own my setting up of my day agenda or to try and occupy my thought space or anything else. I just knew it's like, no, I can't listen to that. If I stay with people and they've got morning TV on, I generally go and find another room. I actually just can't be there. Like I find it like you may as well be shouting at me or, firing a hose of water at me. It's like, no, he saved me from that. I haven't watched the news for decades. And to me, it's like, I don't really agree with your take on things. I'm not interested in your story selection. But the wonders of technology, which works to confirm the suspicions of anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists, is that whatever you've been Googling or looking at on Facebook, the algorithm, of course, gives you more of it. And so people say, oh, yeah, but, it's all a hoax or whatever it is. It's because, look at it, it's all over the internet. Everywhere I look, I get more confirmation of my view. Yeah, well, of course you do, because the Facebook and Google algorithms are going to give you what you're interested in. But I also see the positive side of that, because like with Google on my phone, Google's constantly serving me up stories that I'm interested in, which includes English soccer, so, and they know what teams I like. And so they say, was this post helpful? And you go, yes or no. And they know I'm interested in crypto, and they know I'm interested in following the Evergrande story in China and the whole Chinese property development sector, because that may or may not be the beginning of the next rupture in the financial system, So I'm kind of watching that, right? And it's very interesting. So Google knows this, and they constantly say, here's a story about this, and then was that helpful? Do you want more of this or not? And so what I'm saying is that Google is increasingly delivering me a very highly curated channel of news from many different sources. So I don't even have to go looking. I pick up my phone to Google something, and then just 5 or 10 stories. And then, so in other words, I get the information I want in the day, and a lot of it's just coming because of the Google algorithm on my phone, which I think is awesome. I love it.
Yeah, and I do the same thing with Instagram, with Twitter. Like I'm following it, and so most of the stuff I see is either crypto, funny. It's a funny bit, right? And I love on Instagram, I don't know if you've seen these TikToks where it's like a 20-second, song, and people got to dance in funny ways to it. But I'm literally like addicted to it. It's a great way to go to bed laughing.
So is that a thing? So like, if you're quite young, you watch on TikTok, right? If you're a bit older, then you watch TikTok on Instagram. And if you're a bit older again, like me, you actually watch TikTok on Reddit. Like, why the hell did we just watch it on TikTok?
It's true. It's so true. But like, I only get like these dance videos on Instagram. And I'm like, and that's all I want. People are like, oh, did you see that? I'm like, see what? I'm like, yeah, I'm on Instagram every day. But I'm only watching these dance videos. And even my wife's like, what are you laughing at? I'm like, I'm these dance videos. And it's like usually like a young kid and a dad, or like a mom or a couple of friends. And some of them, like, they're really talented. So I'm like, oh, and to your point, because I've watched them and I like them all the time, I just get those. I don't get anything else. I don't get any other noise. And it's great. So I know people are, and once again, people step into the storyline they want. And, I wrote a paper I shared it with Gary in like, whose storyline are you living? And it was before we even started doing all of this stuff. It was one of the things that I'd step into Joshua, meaning that when you woke up in the morning, you got an email, like you immediately step into somebody else's story. You immediately become that character, right? And you become background noise for somebody else. The minute you let go of what you want to do, your intention, and you pick up and you respond and react. The minute you respond and react, you become part of that, right?
Yeah, that is such a thing with the modern phone, because we are so close to our phones all the time, including first thing in the morning, that it's reasonably hard to filter out emails and WhatsApps from people, for business. Like, they're there on your phone with a notification. And so if you want to have that partitioned use of your time and to own your setup of the day, for example, without somebody else's energy intruding in there, like, it's a very deliberate practice to do that these days, because it's so available.
And I think for me, it changed everything. The minute that I stopped getting up and looking to tackle the day, take on the day, right? You want to control that day. And I'm like, the minute that I stopped doing that is the minute I started to heal. The minute I started to take back those pieces of me that I had thrown out there. And I think, and every day I do that, I take back a little bit more, and I'm able to embrace my own story a little bit more and be able to live in that own story. And for me, like, that's the greatest gift when I see my daughter doing, and I'm just watching, and I'm like, how does that reflect? How is that a reflection on me? Right. Versus me trying to intrude upon that moment and take it over or somehow control it, but just sit back and go, oh my God, like all right, that's perfect. Like, that's just the perfect moment. And just appreciate it and love it for what it is.
So bringing the joy back into your life that you've been doing, that is huge. It is huge. And the stuff you've been talking about really relates also to that course that I'm building, because a lot of people are doing a job they don't like, or dislike even, but the money's good and it's what they do, blah, blah, blah. And so they're stuck on that hamster wheel. And in a way, because we created our own reality, that reality, it's a vibration will match to who we are. So our reality matches our personal vibration. So you've created that, not you personally, but somebody listening to this, you've created your current reality as a match to your vibration. It's your thing, it's you. And so if you dislike it, it's sort of like disliking your creation. And the Joshua approach is, well, you can't really change it by changing the outside circumstance, but if you change your vibration, then your outside circumstance will change to something more pleasant for you. And one of the ways to do that is exactly what you have been talking about, which is that, okay, I may or may not like this job, but first of all, I'm going to have fun today. I'm going to have some pure spontaneous joy. I'm going to notice all the incredible things in my life. And then I'll start noticing some with my colleagues at work and some of the work I'm doing. So in other words, I know it sounds Pollyanna-ish, but it's like, well, first of all, start loving what you do. Because it's your creation, baby. So if you made it, then you better like it, or, you know, realize it's purely a reflection of you because you're saying I don't like myself. So you can see how fundamental that whole thing is, because there's no simple, easy path to say to someone, if you hate your job, here's how Rob's course is going to transform your life. Because, you know, I'll have one of those, please. You know, that comes in a cup, right? So, yeah, or it comes, you know, in a document. Like, sorry, you have to do a little bit of work yourself as well. And it does begin with what you're talking about, which is consciously and deliberately having joy and appreciation and love in every moment. And both of us have moved a long way towards that. But what you've been saying really models that beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, if you and I mean, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, the idea that you have to challenge the day, you know, is such a prevalent concept in our society, and it's what keeps us in the illusion, right? It's what keeps us blind to all of that, all of the love and all of the beauty that's around us.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, I said to this. I said to the guy, we were doing this program, and we had this guy come over, and I said, you know, the big difference of why this is working is before we were trying to change conditions to force it to meet our needs.
Yeah.
And now it's effortlessly creating this positive opportunity for everybody. One naturally fits together, and the other could have happened, but it was literally, we were forcing pieces to fit together to get a desired outcome. That I'm like, I said to him, like, it took an extra year and a half to put this program together, but the program fell together effortlessly when it was the right time.
Wow.
And, you know, it's so funny. It's like, because I struggle with that a little bit, like changing conditions or creating opportunities, right? You and I both talk about, you know, businesses, right? Are we changing conditions or are we creating opportunities?
Yeah, that's the thing. And you do have to take action. You do have to push past fear. It's not like you sit on the couch and contemplate and think for a living, you know, you actually have to do some shit too. But, you know, you were talking before about that Facebook page or whatever, and you said it had 10 million followers or 10.3 or whatever the number was. And the message was about effort and struggle and controlling conditions and all the rest of it. The picture that came into my mind was somebody out there sold 10.3 million hamster wheels.
Wow, that is the greatest analogy on the planet, right? That greatest analogy. And how does he sell it? He shows a plane in the background. He shows his Bentley, right? He shows a view of Manhattan, right, of the skyline. That's his apartment, right? And people think that's what they want. I'm like, I did that. And you don't want that. That
Yeah.
doesn't know, I don't know what to say. Like, that is not like the added, until your mind, until you get to the point where you understand what you're vibrationally unlocking in your universe, because if there are 7 billion people on the planet, there are 7 billion different universes. Until you fully understand how important understanding what your vibrational key is unlocking, you shouldn't ask for anything. You should never. I mean, to be honest, because asking without understanding, right, is a disaster. It's just it's absolute disaster waiting to happen. Asking within the right vibrational alignment, understanding where it's going to be, having that intention, all of that seems to make things fit together with ease and in an effortless way, right? But people want to jam that request. I want this, and like, well, why? And what are you going to get from it, right? And I'm spending so much time trying to understand what my vibration is unlocking. If everything already exists, if everything already exists, if every word already exists, if every concept already exists, any word or any concept or any action or any activity that actually happens to me, I am unlocking at that specific moment.
That is the key concept, isn't it? The idea that everything exists in what some people call the field of potentiality, and you just have to become a vibrational match to it to bring it into your life. And Joshua says that about ideas as well, that we are bringing ideas into our reality because we've become a vibrational match to them. There may be ideas that Joshua is aware of, but they're coming into the human experience because we've become a vibrational match to those ideas.
That to me is the biggest concept I could ever communicate to somebody and have them understand it, that I'm unhappy because of X. Well, okay, you have unlocked that experience. You have brought it to you. You have dragged it in. Like, you need to understand why you've done that. Like, okay, and right, like, ask yourself, why did I do that? How did I get there? Like, and how do I get to the other side of it? Like, what is the opposite and the other side? So, like, even for me, taking that deep breath, taking a very, very deep breath, and then putting a smile on my face and going like, okay, and just sitting there for 10 minutes, just doing that. Like, what am I unlocking? Like, what experience have I just unlocked? That's why these calls, I think, are so important.
It's a very quiet and easy practice, isn't it?
And that's what these calls are like for me. Like, when you and I do these calls, I know that we're talking at our highest possible level. We're talking for the highest good of anybody that's ever going to watch this, right? What are we unlocking? Like, I don't know. I know that I always feel better after these calls.
Same. They're uplifting. The energy is good. With the idea you mentioned before that people think they want the jet, the Manhattan skyline view apartment, which would be quite nice. The Rolls Royce or whatever it might be, the Lamborghini, the Ferrari. The woman said to me in a call about 3.5 years ago, I still remember sitting in this farmhouse in countryside in France, right? We spent a summer there. And she said to me something like, well, what we really want is the feeling that thing gives us. And I understood intellectually what she was saying, but I was like, what the hell does this mean? And she said, we don't necessarily want the thing, we just want the feeling we get from the thing. And it wasn't until I started doing this Joshua work, which is what you've been just alluding to as well. We think we want that jet or that car or that apartment, but we actually want the feeling that thing would give us. And the feeling is an inside job, and you start with the feeling, and then you realize, well, actually, I don't need to have my private jet to have that amazing feeling every day. It's free. You just got to match your vibration to it, and there it is. You feel that good as if you had the jet all day, every day. And if you need the jet, it'll come along nicely. I do like what Warren Buffett called his jet when, the Berkshire Hathaway guy said, you got to spend less time traveling around the world and around America on airlines, Warren. We need to get you a private jet. And, he's not a guy who wants to have status symbol assets. So he called his jet the Indefensible.
That's very clever. That's
Yeah, well, he's a very clever man. Very clever
Yeah.
man.
I like, for me, like we do this club for these girls. We have an athletic club, and we're doing a tournament in Texas, and some girls couldn't come for price reasons. And for me, when you talk about money, like the first thing I would do is dump six figures into this club. Nobody would ever have to pay again. Now, am I changing conditions or am I creating opportunities? For me, I'm creating opportunities because I'm not forcing anybody to do anything.
Yeah. So I've asked questions of Joshua around that, about, because Joshua talks about transactional giving, right? When you're doing things transactionally. So if you're doing it like a lot of donors do, because they want to have their name there, they want recognition, they want to feel they're doing good and all the rest of it, you know, it's a societal thing and they want to be visible with it, then it's a transactional thing and it's not really going to help you or them. But if you're doing it purely out of love, which, you know, could be, if you do it anonymously, doesn't have to be anonymous, but if you're doing it purely out of love and you're giving out of love with the best intentions, because you see some kid and think, oh, it'd be awesome if that kid could actually play that sport or go to this event or whatever the thing is. If you're doing it from a pure place of love and giving, you know, that's what we want to be doing, not doing it transactionally where we're looking for the, you know, the quid pro quo.
And that's a great distinction. And I like what you just said there too, because it wouldn't be transactional. It would just be, hey, if you made this team, you never have to pay for thing again. When there are so many kids, and I look out there and I see kids deciding not to do something because they don't have money. And I'm like, okay, don't ever let that come into your head again.
Yeah.
Go after everything you want to do. Does it make you happy? Yep. Boom.
And there are some sports and activities that do require money, like sports that have equipment, you know, like golf or skiing or whatever, snowboarding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that to me, I think I'm at a point now where anything I can do that creates an opportunity for either myself or somebody else, that is where I'm leaning, right? Because a lot of times you get up and you do your task list, do a task list, and all of those things are just getting things done, crossing off your list. They're not they're not creating opportunities.
No, you're talking about expansion, right? You're talking about the expansion of all that is, and you're allowing people to pursue their talents and interests and passions and joy. Yeah.
And creating an opportunity could just be doing this. This is not a task because you never know where the conversation is going to go. You never know who's going to see it, and it creates conversation and it creates thought. So it creates opportunities. Like that to me is how many times can I do that? Interject that in my day, right? How many times can I do that versus how many times can I just, you know? And I would, you know, I have a full notebook and I would say, hey, I got it all done today, right? Yeah. But did you really?
Yeah. What does it mean to get that done? Yeah.
I do want to listen. I know we didn't get a chance today to talk about it. I had those three things that you talked about, and I do want to talk about the authentic life. I think that's super, super important, and I kind of want to lean into
next time. Yeah.
So next time,
let's be authentic. Yeah.
I do really want to lean into that as well. But I got a call coming up. But this was awesome.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time.
Time to wrap it up. We are complete, as they say.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Rob.
Thank you, Jerry. Good to see you. Enjoy your evening.
See you, my friend.
Bye.